Hey y'all, welcome to Soccer for Us. I'm Bart, and today it's just me talking. And I'm going to talk about the U.S. men's national team's September World Cup qualifying window. Now, I didn't really want to bring a guest onto this particular episode because I feel like we've had a lot of discussion and debate and gnashing of teeth and clenching of fists and all those cliches to talk about the problems that the team faced in this past window to start the 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign. But I wanted to be able to lay out my thoughts a little bit more clearly, concisely, and not get muddled with a bunch of discussion about whether or not we think Berhalter should go or whether we think that John Brooks is somehow a terrible center back now. I really just wanted to focus on both the micro of the 3 games that we played and the macro takeaways that we have from this window. So I'm going to talk about the problems and the issues that the team created for themselves and faced on the field. But I also want to talk about the bright spots that we saw within the window and some positives we can take from individual performances and some things that we can look forward to as we head into the October window. So that's going to be the first part of the show. And then at the end, I'm going to give a quick preview of the U.S. women's national team's September friendlies against Paraguay. So that will be pretty quick and dirty, but I wanted to make sure that we talked about that because Vlatko has called in a squad that might look like what we'll see as we prepare for 2023. Before we get started, I have to obviously remind you to please subscribe to Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening right now. That way you get every episode of not only Soccer for Us, but also the daily Soccer Down Here show and the other great content that gets produced by the SDH network. Also give the show a follow on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod. I have asked some people for their thoughts on this window and got a lot of feedback. So I'm excited to kind of share those thoughts and talk about them on this episode. I do post usually daily on that channel and give my thoughts and opinions on things. And as Champions League's, kind of that competition heats up, we'll have a lot of Americans to watch. And so, give me a follow at Soccer for Us Pod. So let's go through the timeline of the September World Cup qualifying window. The U.S. started off the campaign in San Salvador, El Salvador on Thursday, September 2nd. It was a 0-0 draw between the U.S. and El Salvador. Not inspiring start, but a draw nonetheless. And at that point, I would have told you, and I think I did say that, it was concerning, but really what matters is the Canada performance. So that 0-0 draw wasn't great, to put it nicely. The starting 11 from that match for the U.S. was Matt Turner in goal, Serginho Dest at left back, Tyler Adams in midfield, Gio Reyna on the wing, Weston McKennie also in midfield, Josh Sargent starting as a 9, Brendan Aronson starting in midfield, Miles Robinson and Tim Ream were your center back pairing, Conrad De La Fuente on the left, and DeAndre Yedlin on the right side of the defense. No goals scored, and overall El Salvador did outpossess the United States, which is something that I do have a little bit of an issue with. The U.S. outshot El Salvador, which I guess is a good thing because, if you're not holding a lot of the possession, you should be creating more chances than the other team through this Berhalter system, in theory. Passes weren't terribly out of whack. 369 for El Salvador, 353 for the U.S. Passing accuracy about the same as well, 72 to 71. I do want to point out that this pitch was not in great condition for possessive attacking soccer. El Salvador also struggled on it. That's not anything against El Salvador or the El Salvadorian Federation. I think that this pitch was just waterlogged and slow because they probably hadn't been able to really cut it in a while because they had been enduring a lot of rain in the week leading up to this match. They even had rain the day of the match. So that's the unfortunate reality of playing literally in the tropical environments that, these countries are in during late summer. Overall, I thought this was just a very disjointed performance from the U.S. I don't think that there was ever a time where it looked like we were definitely the better team, but I think that we did create better chances. Miles Robinson and Weston McKennie probably could have done better to put their shots on target. They both of them, well, Miles really had a free header in the first half early on, and I think had that gone in, would have changed the whole game. And then Wes had a chance in the second half that, it wasn't a free header necessarily, but he probably should have done better to at least put his chance on goal. So I don't know. I think at this point I was frustrated with the actual performance, but not overall dissatisfied with the result. A tie on the road in CONCACAF is never a bad thing. I do want to point that out. It's not a bad thing. And I think I say this a lot when I talk to Atlanta United fans. Drawing on the road in MLS is a great thing. Drawing on the road is always good. You'll take that point. So if that's your start, that's okay. And again, I don't like the idea that the recipe to qualify is win at home, draw on the road, because I think that leaves a lot of margin for error. But as I said after this game, this result I was more okay with because at least it looked like the team played to win, right? And that's what I want to see from the U.S. on the road is be set up and play and come ready to win road games because there will be a lot of opportunities to win on the road in this cycle. And I think that they did that. So I'm not overall pissed, at the result or performance in El Salvador, but I think it was, now looking back, kind of a sign of things to come, right? There was very little real creative thought in the attack. Attacks seemed to kind of fizzle out when we got into the attacking third. And, defensively, there weren't any real problems, but we still offered El Salvador a lot of chances. So the 0-0 draw was kind of fair to both teams. And overall, not the worst start to a qualifying campaign, but it did throw a wet blanket on what was a lot of hype around this team going into this cycle. So you get a draw in San Salvador. You fly back to Nashville, Tennessee, where the U.S. played Canada on Sunday, September 5th. Now, this result was a 1-1 draw it felt more like a loss. Again, you go back to the idea that you have to win your home games, and that gives you the opportunity to then, settle for draws on the road. You can't lose at home to Canada. You just can't. Canada struggled to find real opportunities against Honduras in their match earlier. They tied 1-1. Both of those goals in the Canada-Honduras match came from penalty kicks. So, if you're the U.S., you have to look at this game as just an utter disappointment. Starting 11 for Greg Berhalter. In goal was Matt Turner. The back line was Serginho Dest, this time on the right. You had Anthony Robinson on the left. Your center back pairing was John Brooks and Miles Robinson. In the midfield, you had Tyler Adams, Sebastian Lletget, and Kellen Acosta. I didn't like Kellen Acosta starting at the 8 in this game, but with Weston McKennie suspended for breaking COVID protocols, didn't really have a whole lot of other options unless you wanted to throw Christian Roldan out there. And that kind of leads to another problem that I had with Berhalter throughout this entire window, and that was roster management. I have a whole segment planned for that later on in this show, so stick around. And your attacking three was Brendan Aronson, Christian Pulisic, and Jordan Pefok. Now, I kind of like the idea of putting Pefok up top. Sargent wasn't super effective in El Salvador. Why not give Pefok a chance? I don't think he was any worse than Sargent. I don't think he was that much better. But I think the problem was that the system wasn't allowing Pefok to do what he does really well, and that's a little bit more be athletic, win balls in the air, jump on opportunities. And Canada was always going to, sit deep. That's what they did this match. They sat deep, okay? They had 28% of possession. Now, I'm not going to claim to be smarter than Greg Berhalter when it comes to soccer tactics, but the fact that this team looked so unprepared or shocked that Canada were just going to sit deep and defend and look for spots to break on the counter through Alphonso Davies or Tejan Buchanan when he came in the second half. That seems negligent on Berhalter's part, right? Why was this team not prepared to do that? And it seemed like, especially in the first half, the only solution was to drop Lletget and Acosta deeper. They were basically playing in the positions where the fullback should have been. So, yeah, I guess that made the fullbacks go higher, but the problem was that we didn't have any layers to our attack. We had one line high and we had one line deep, and there was nothing in the middle. And that was really frustrating because Canada was happy to sit in a five-man back line and then put midfielders in front of that, so there were no passing lanes. The way you can easily disrupt that is put players at multiple levels or layers in your attack so that those Canadian defenders have to choose whether they're going to actually defend a person, defend the space, go to a pass. All these things would have just created problems for the Canadian defense to solve, and we never really asked any questions of them. And that's frustrating because, again, Berhalter, this is what he should have been doing. He had how many months to prepare for Canada, and we just looked unprepared. So I gave the starting lineup. The first half was frustrating, and it became even more frustrating when Sergiño Dest goes out with a sprained ankle. So before halftime even comes around, we have to make a change, and DeAndre Yedlin comes in for Sergiño Dest. Now, I don't think Dest was super awesome during this window, but I thought he was very good in this game on the right. He got beat a couple of times by Davies, really only one big time by Davies, but overall, he was fine. And he was definitely one of the more influential attackers that we had. He was definitely able to beat Canadian players. He was working kind of well with Aronson on that right side to create, again, problems for the Canadian defense to have to solve. And they weren't solving them all that well. We had a couple of chances in the first half. Christian Pulisic hit the post. I think Leggett had actually a pretty decent half volley chance or full volley chance as well. So it was frustrating that we weren't scoring and we weren't creating a lot of good opportunities, but there were chances, and overall we were handling Canada pretty okay. Dest has to come out, Yedlin comes in, half ends, and it's just very, you can feel the tension. I could, anyway, feel the tension in the stadium. 0-0 with Canada. This team had not really looked capable of scoring now. We hadn't scored in 3 total halves and hadn't scored really from open play much at all this summer. There were legit questions. 55th minute, though, Brendan Aronson starts a counterattack, basically, where he nips a ball off of a Canadian defender who, for some reason, Canada was trying to possess the ball out of the back, and it bit them. Aronson nips it from Kennedy, I believe it was, and starts an attack that way. It goes eventually out wide to Anthony Robinson, who crosses it across goal for Brendan Aronson to slot home. Not the tidiest of finishes, but it goes in the back of the net. Aronson has scored, and the U.S. are up 1-0. And at that point, it kind of felt like, okay, cool, we did it. Now let's continue to create these opportunities. But it was the exact opposite. Canada almost immediately was like, cool, y'all scored, we're going to score too. And it seemed inevitable that Canada were going to score after they conceded that goal. And they do. 7 minutes later, Kyle Larin scores on a cross from Alphonso Davies. He was wide open in the box. It was too casual from everyone involved. Too casual clearing out the lines. Too casual switching from left to right. Brooks was, and Yedlin were a little too casual in defending who they needed to defend. Yedlin gets beat by Davies. Miles Robinson is a step off. And then Brooks just lets Kyle Larin walk into the box unmarked and doesn't even defend the cross. And it's 1-1. And here's the difference that I found between these two managers. When Canada conceded, almost immediately, John Herdman subbed out the guy who made the mistake, Kennedy. But he made a change. He realized, okay, well, we got to make a change. And he did. And he made a couple more changes even after they scored. Greg Berhalter didn't make a real change, until the 82nd minute. That's when the subs came on. And I'm not saying that the subs necessarily were bad. I don't think they were that helpful. But you could have made a sub in the anywhere between the 62nd and 82nd minute. You had 20 minutes in there that you could have brought a guy on to just change something. And in his post-match press conference, he said that they're looking to make subs for players who aren't really playing up to the standard they want. And I get that. I understand that part of what you're looking for when you're making subs is who's playing poorly. But at this point, we just needed to change something. So it's not about who's playing poorly necessarily. It's who on your bench can you bring in to change the game. And the problem therein lies that maybe Berhalter didn't think there was anyone on his bench that could come in and change that game, which is a problem because at that point, Tim Weah was left off the roster for injury and he wasn't replaced. At this point, as I mentioned, Weston McKennie sent home for COVID violation, well, suspended for this game for COVID violations. And also, I didn't mention, Gio Reyna wasn't available for the rest of the window because he has a hamstring pull. Now, those are three three attacking players who could have been helpful in this game. What did Greg Berhalter do? Nothing. He didn't call anyone up to even think about replacing them. He could have replaced Weah before the camp even started. He could have called in someone to replace Reyna. And I know this because he called in Sean Johnson to replace Zach Steffen. So if the problem is that he didn't think that anyone was performing below the standard he wanted, fine, sure. That's a take that I'm not going to argue with him too much on because I don't think anyone was playing that poorly. But the other thing you use subs for is to change the pace and the flow and the tempo of a game. And he didn't do that until the 82nd minute when you barely can get your teeth into a match anyway. So did he look down his bench and not see anyone who he thought could impact this game in a positive way? If not, that's on him because he had the opportunities to bring in players who could do that, and he didn't. So we get a 1-1 draw with Canada at home, and I was at this game, and it was incredibly disappointing because it wasn't the same fear necessarily as what had happened in 2018's cycle, but it felt very similar of, why did we just give up this result? We should not have given up a result at home. There was no need for that. Canada outshot us, or we outshot Canada 11-6, but when it came to chances created, we were fairly even. Canada only completed 231 passes. They were very disinterested in playing any sort of progressive soccer. And again, the team just looked so unprepared for that. That was really concerning. And that is where I was frustrated with Berhalter because that's his job as a manager, is to prepare the team for challenges that the team may face on the field. And if you did not think that Canada was going to sit in a 5-back system and absorb pressure, then I don't, why wouldn't you think that? That's probably the better question. Why would you not think that they would do that? That's mystifying to me for Berhalter. Now, there were some players who weren't great. I mentioned John Brooks. Probably shouldn't have given up that goal, right? And then he got burned again by Tajon Buchanan. DeAndre Yedlin proving this window that he's not a great defender. But overall, there's no reason that we should have lost points at home to Canada. We should have taken all 3 against them, and we didn't. And that's super disappointing. And most of that is on Greg Berhalter. So we have 2 draws, 2 points. And we head into a match in Honduras where we have historically struggled to get points, needing at least a draw, if not a win, to really make this CONCACAF World Cup qualifying cycle start on a decent foot. Now, the only thing that is going in our favor at this point is really only Mexico at this point was gaining points at a good advantage. Canada, yeah, they tied us at home. They had tied Honduras, right? So they're at 2 points. We're at 2 points. A lot of teams at this point were sitting just on 2 points. So there wasn't a gap in the standings. I'm going to say this and I don't care, but at some point, honestly, you have to just kind of want Mexico to win all their matches, right? If they're dominating everyone else, that means they're not getting points against Mexico. That's fine for the U.S. because that means that those teams aren't making up points against you. So Mexico, with the points that they had at that point, I think they had 6 at that point. It's fine. Whatever. I'll take it. We were lucky that a lot of the other teams weren't winning matches. Now, I think that was kind of, that'll be a theme as we go through these qualifying windows of 3 games. I don't think we're going to see a lot of goals scored in those first games in the windows, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of wins overall. Except for the U.S. We should be expecting to win just about every game we step foot in. But I think these windows are going to be incredibly tough for a lot of the teams who do not have the depth of the U.S. and Mexico. So we go into Honduras needing a result, which, again, is tough for us. So Wednesday, September 8th, the U.S. pull out somehow a 4-1 win over Honduras. Now, this was a Jekyll and Hyde game because the first half was absolutely terrible. And Greg Berhalter is a lot to blame for that because his starting 11, his formation choice, everything about it created the problems that we had pretty much throughout the game. He changed them at halftime, and he deserves some credit for that. But I don't give you a lot of credit for fixing the problem that you caused when you only fixed the problem you caused in about one half of the 6 that you played in this window. He hadn't really fixed any other problems in any other games that we had played. And he didn't fix any problems during the half of this game in which we were struggling. His starting 11 was Matt Turner in goal, a back line of George Bello on the left, John Brooks and Miles Robinson in the middle, and Tyler Adams at right back. Our best midfielder available at this point, because again, Weston McKennie sent home. Our best midfielder is playing right wing back. Now, I understand that Berhalter thinks that Tyler Adams played a lot of this position at Leipzig, and that's true. But Leipzig aren't playing the same style that we are. They're a high press, turn the ball over and go type of team. That's not what Berhalter wants this team to be. Kellen Acosta has had experience at right back. You could have also just hauled in another right back. Could have played them, because if you were so worried about DeAndre Yedlin having a lot of minutes, you could have just called in a right back. But you didn't, Greg. You started our best midfielder at right back. That's frustrating, because our midfield duo was James Sands and Kellen Acosta. Now, I don't think Kellen Acosta is a bad player, and I really don't think James Sands is a bad player either. But when they're the only two midfielders, I don't expect great things from them. James Sands, not exactly the best at covering a whole lot of space. We saw in the Gold Cup he works better in a 3-person partnership in the center back pairing, or center back partnership. And as we've seen a lot in his MLS, when he plays defensive midfielder, it's usually the deeper of a 3-person midfield. Putting him in a 2-man midfield with Kellen Acosta is a recipe for disaster, and it showed almost immediately when he just fell all over the place, all over the field. It was a horrendous night from James Sands. Now, our attacking 3, Christian Pulisic on the left, Josh Sargent kind of on the right, and Ricardo Pepi up top. I didn't mind this. I thought that, again, we're lacking winger depth because Greg refused to bring in wingers after guys got hurt or didn't make it to camp. So Josh Sargent playing as a right winger, or playing on the right side of a forward 3, not the worst idea I think I've ever thought of, but it didn't really work either. And Greg talked about how the pressing from the front 3 wasn't really cohesive and didn't really fit the script that he had, which, again, everything is about Berhalter's script, so you got to make sure you pay attention to it. This lineup was just not good. The starting 11 was not good. There were spaces all over the field, and Honduras had way too much opportunities to possess the ball. Now, did we have some chances to score in the first half? Yeah, we had a couple. They weren't great. Honduras didn't have that many chances either, but they did score the one. That was a very big breakdown all over the field. 27th minute, Brian Moya scores on Diego Lopez cross. It was a bad goal to give up. A pass goes right between Sands and Acosta. Neither of them are able to challenge for it to a wide open man, so John Brooks has to step up. He can't really foul a guy there, I guess. He could have, sure, but, I get why he didn't just hack the guy. Sure, I'm not, he probably could have taken the yellow card, whatever. But at that point, you at least forced him to go wide. And at that point, we have people covered. The ball goes to the left side of the Honduras attack, and it's not a really complicated cross. Just cross to a guy who's somehow free in the middle of the box because, and I'll say it, George Bello didn't track him. George Bello saw him, said, hey, someone get that guy. But the problem is, George, you got to get that guy because you've got to know that Brooks had been upfield. And Brooks, sure, shouldn't have lost that challenge, probably could have hustled back. All these things are valid. This is a lot on George Bello. It's a lot on John Brooks. It's a lot on Kellen Acosta and James Sands for not patrolling the midfield well. It was a breakdown just about everywhere. And it was a system that Berhalter put in place that broke down. So again, I'm not giving you a lot of credit, Greg, when you make changes at halftime. Those changes came and we definitely looked better. We switched to a back 4, subbed out Brooks for Leggett. Okay, so that's a very attacking sub. Subbed out Sargent for Aronson. and subbed out Bello for Robinson. Now, Anthony Robinson had a great window. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But all these changes definitely impacted the game in a positive way. We went back to, again, that 4-3-3 that, yeah, I get it. It doesn't attack necessarily as a 4-3-3, but like it's a 4-3-3. Um, the combination of Leggett, Acosta, and Sands in the middle did take away a lot of the space Honduras had. They were still, possessing the ball pretty well, but that took away a lot of that space. Aronson provided a much more aggressive attack and aggressive press up top. And Anthony Robinson was just so much better on the left side than George Bello. And that's not anything against George Bello. It's just that, Anthony Robinson is a better player right now than George Bello. That's fine to say. So Greg kind of cleaned up his mess because 48th minute, 3 minutes after halftime, Robinson, with a beautiful side-footed volley, puts the ball in the back of the net, and we're tied at 1-1. I think Pepe's getting a credit for that assist, but it was a cross from Leggett. Pepe put it down in the box, and Robinson slided it home. Slided it is not fair. It was a very fine finish in the air, side-footed volley, beautiful, and then he does a nice little standing reverse tuck to celebrate. But we're at 1-1 for a very long time, and we're creating some better chances, but Honduras is also still possessing the ball, still, looking fairly competent against us. Finally, the 75th minute comes in, and Ricardo Pepi gets the goal that puts us ahead 2-1. A cross from Yedlin, a beautiful header from Pepe. He rises above the Honduran defender and puts it into the side of the net. And hey, we're up 2-1. It feels a whole lot better. We get a third goal in the 86th minute because Brendan Aronson, an assist from Ricardo Pepi, a great night from him. And then the final goal was a Sebastian Leggett tap in after Ricardo Pepi. His shot from close range was denied, but it was such a good shot that it still was hard for the keeper to save it completely, and Leggett tapped it in. So yes, Berhalter fixed his own issues, but he still caused them to begin with. And okay, fine. 5 points in the window, not the end of the world. But when you look at the games, the U.S. did not dominate any of those games, right? That's the problem. We dominated possession against Canada. We certainly didn't dominate the game against Canada. And then against Honduras outpossessed us. They outshot us. Now, granted, we had more shots on target. We had a similar passing accuracy number. Those are great. But we're still getting outpossessed on the road to Central American teams, which was not the goal that Berhalter had in mind for us. We're still, even in the 4-1 win, not creating enough quality chances to guarantee a lot of goals created from attacking play, from live play. These are issues. And when you look at the attack that we had in all three of these games, our best chances came off of moments of transition. Now, Caleb, who I didn't bring onto this podcast episode, just again, because I wanted to clearly communicate my thoughts, I tweeted this out that hey, our best moments are still coming in transition. And a lot of that's true. We created some in the Honduras match, but Honduras, we should create chances like that against them. They're going to sit deep. So you're not going to get a lot of transition moments against them, but we still scored a goal or two off a transition. Our goal in the Canada match was off a transition. And he said that in the modern game, those transition moments are where the best opportunities come from. And that's valid. That's absolutely true. You're probably still going to have the most opportunities, the best opportunities, when you turn the other team over, especially in their middle or attacking third. That's true. But Greg Berhalter doesn't want to rely on that. He is here to instill a possessive style of soccer that, as he says, disrupts the opponent through possession. We're not seeing that. Haven't seen it in these three games. Didn't see it a whole lot during the Gold Cup or Nations League. So my question to Greg Berhalter is, do you see your vision working on the field? And if so, where is it working? Because I don't see that working. If it's not working on the field, what's the problem? Is it the players not executing? Or is your system not able to be executed well by these players? Or is your system maybe not the best way to attack CONCACAF teams. The results we got against Mexico weren't because we outpossessed them, okay? It was a very typical US-Mexico match. We sat, we defended, we fought hard, we pressed them really well, I think, and created turnovers. That's not what Berhalter wants to do. So that's where I'm confused, is what the hell does Greg Berhalter want this team to be? And does that align with the best way to win matches in CONCACAF? I don't see that aligning right now. Now, I don't want to have this just be a whole podcast of me complaining, so I do want to talk about some positives. On the individual, individuals in this window did play well. I thought Anthony Robinson was probably the biggest winner from an individual in this window. He not only defended pretty well in the games that he played, but it was very clear that he was better at left back and a better option at left back than Serginho Dest could be. Now, I think that's a problem Berhalter has consistently, is he tries to get cute and put players out of position. Anthony Robinson is good enough at left back that we do not have to start Serginho Dest at left back. Serginho Dest can start at right back, and Anthony Robinson can start at left back. That's great. And Anthony Robinson was influential throughout this entire camp. He had a goal. He had an assist. He was great. He needs to be our starting left back. Stop with the debate. We have to stop with the debate of, I don't know where Dest plays. No, Dest is your right back. Anthony Robinson is your left back. Jedi had a great camp, and we need to start making the narrative that he's our starting left back. I also thought Miles Robinson, he had a great Gold Cup, and to see that continue into this World Cup qualifying window was fantastic because, James Sands had a really good Gold Cup, didn't really transition into this window. Other guys have had good tournaments that didn't necessarily play out in the long run for World Cup qualifying. Miles Robinson did, and I think he proved that he's your starting right center back going forward. Now, we can talk about Chris Richards all we want. That's fine. Miles Robinson has proved it on the field for the U.S. every single time he's been there. Has he had a few more opportunities than Chris? Yeah. Part of that's just being healthy. But when he's had those opportunities, he's shown very well. I think he's your starting right center back going forward. Does that mean that Chris Richards isn't part of the discussion? No, he is. Of course he is. He might be your starting left center back. I don't know. Mark McKenzie wasn't terrible against Honduras, right? I didn't hate it. So, for me, Miles is right now playing the best of any of the center backs you have in your pool. Ricardo Pepi did a lot to raise his stock. Now, having a goal, an assist, and also pretty much influencing another goal will help. But I think more importantly, you compare that to what Josh Sargent and Jordan Pefok did this window. It's hard to argue that Ricardo Pepi doesn't deserve more minutes as your starting number 9. I don't know who that starter is right now. I don't know who the starting striker is for the U.S. men's national team. I don't know if we have an answer. But I think Ricardo Pepi deserves more looks to see if he is the solution. A couple of other positives. So kind of, again, on the whole, 5 points was the bare minimum, but it was achieved. And again, if we're looking at that recipe, I don't agree with it, but the recipe of win at home, draw away, was that necessarily executed this window? No, but the points still reflect that recipe. You got 2 draws and a win out of the 3 games, where you had 2 home game and 2 road games. So that's kind of, again, I said the bare minimum. That's the bare acceptable result from this window. And again, compared to where everyone else is in CONCACAF, we're third, right? We're tied on points with Canada and Panama, but this 4-1 win and the fact that we drew the other 2 games means that we still have a pretty good goal differential. We have 5 goals scored for us, 2 against us. Okay, that's a +3 goal differential. That's good heading into the second window of qualifying. We did prove that we can win on the road. We proved that we can win on the road. We did it against Honduras. Now, are we going to always have oh my gosh, we must win on the road, our backs are against the wall, everything's shit, and boys, we got to go get it done? No, because I don't think the Panama away game in October is going to be that way. But this team hopefully showed to themselves that they can win on the road in CONCACAF. And we're going to need them. I said we're going to need road wins. We're going to need road wins, right? Because you can't necessarily guarantee you're going to draw every game on the road. if you play for a draw. But if you play to win road games, you're going to get a few wins, and that's going to outweigh drawing every game on the road. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now let's move on to some negatives, right? There were more negatives than positives this window, so we need to hit them and give them time. Individually, John Brooks was not good this window. He didn't start the first game, which fine, whatever. Didn't expect him to. Started against Canada and is very much responsible for that goal that they conceded. He just stopped defending. That's your job as a center back, is to defend. I don't care how good you are on the ball. If you're not going to be solid defensively, you're not really useful. He got subbed out at halftime of that Honduras game. He was in a back three with Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie, two guys who are much less experienced, both in qualifying and just international soccer as a whole and in their careers. And he got benched. Of those three, he was the one who was pulled. Not great for John Brooks. He needs to, and then he had a terrible showing in Champions League coming back. He's got to figure himself out because this was a rough week for him. Maybe September is just going to be a bad month, but he's still, in my opinion, the most talented center back we have in this pool. We need him to be in this player pool. We need him to be a part of camps because he's too good to not have him there, but he's got to perform better. The same can be said of Sergiño Dest, right? He is our most lethal, I think, attacking option, period. He's our best fullback. I do think that Greg needs to play him in position. He needs to be played as a right back. But similar to Brooks, just because you have the talent and you play at a really good club and you're playing Champions League, you still have to come show up and perform for the U.S. national team. And Dest hasn't done that in a while for the U.S., and that's concerning. Though he played a lot of minutes at right back, I thought DeAndre Edlin was very bad at right back this window. Defensively, he was a liability. He was a liability in possession against El Salvador, passing balls out of bounds, letting balls go out of bounds off his touch. He got beat by Davies real bad. Yeah, he got an assist against Honduras, but this was overall not a good window for DeAndre Edlin. And his problem is that there are a lot of right backs in this pool who can do what he did or better. Combining these two individuals, because I talked about Pepe being a positive, well, Sargic and Pifak were not. They were not. I don't want to say they're negatives, but they didn't add anything to this team. They were wholly ineffective as strikers. They didn't create any goals. That's not what we need from the number 9 position. I also thought James Sands was, I don't want to write him off, but he had a really, really bad game against Honduras. The only time he appeared. Was he played out of position? Not necessarily, but he wasn't put in a position to succeed. I think we know the limitations of James Sands, and we need to be respectful of those. Christian Pulisic also didn't have a fantastic window. I want Greg to stop forcing Puli to take all the set pieces. He's okay on corners. He's not great from free kicks. We don't have a guy who I think is great on free kicks except for Gio Reyna. So I don't know. I don't want to say he played poorly because I don't think it was that, but he does need to be a little bit more connected with the rest of his team. But again, that goes back to Greg Berhalter. Needs to be able to create chances for him to play with the rest of the team. And then finally, the last individual, Weston McKennie. Sorry, man, that was unacceptable. I'm not getting mad at you for doing the things you did, right? We don't know exactly what happened, but basically we know that he exited the bubble and brought someone back into the bubble. Am I mad at him for going out and having fun in Nashville and maybe getting it in while he's there? No, because that's what I did. I went to Nashville and was all up in those bars. But he has to be more responsible and mindful of the fact that he is a leader within this team. He's a leader of this group. And ultimately, he's responsible to not just the guys in that locker room, but to a nation of fans who need him to be at his best and perform up to the level we need him to perform to be successful in qualifying. It really hurt not having him against both Canada and Honduras. It really did. And the last two negatives that I have before I really get into something negative. Dropping points at home is unacceptable. We can't allow that again unless it's maybe to Mexico. But you can't drop points at home, period. Dropping points at home to Canada was unacceptable. You can't do that. And then the last one is in-game subs. The ones against El Salvador and Canada were wholly ineffective. They came too late. They didn't really influence the game at all. And Greg Berhalter continues to be very problematic with his in-game adjustments. All right, well, now that I've kind of given my pros and cons from this window, I did ask for you all to reply to me on Twitter with your pros and cons. So here's y'all's responses to what I asked for. Again, follow the show at Soccer for Us Pod. Thanks to everyone who responded. So the first one comes from Andrew Giraldi at _Giraldi on Twitter. Will the real Greg Berhalter please step up and stop deceiving the public? Right on, Andrew. You know, we saw Berhalter make really effective changes and timely changes against Honduras, but against Canada and El Salvador, they were neither timely nor effective. And, you know, we spent all summer praising him for the results he got, but now when the results really matter, struggling to find those. So, yeah, he needs to figure out who he is right now. Unbaked Elf USMNT at Stacks_Bobby says the cons were injury issues big time. We still looked disjointed. Right back is a question. Need more creativity in midfield. Greg's roster, lineup, and tactical decisions at times. ? Pros. Pepe in all caps. We have our starting left back and a solid starting center back. Aronson is a workhorse beast. 5 points is good enough. And yeah, I think that's kind of where I am, is that there were a lot of cons. And in Greg Berhalter's defense, the injury issues were not necessarily his fault, except for the Tim Weah issue. But, you know, he can't plan for Dest or Reyna to get hurt. He can't plan for Zach Steffen to not only have back spasms, but then test positive for COVID. These are things, you know, he can't plan for McKinney to do his stupid thing that he did in Nashville. But at the end of the day, we did get 5 points, and that's acceptable. Not perfectly acceptable, but that is acceptable. Andrew Bucciolato at A2Booch on Twitter says the pros emergence of Pepe and the Robinson family, LOL, Jedi and Miles, plus the depth of the squad. Cons, Berhalter tactics, McKinney being dumb, injuries. Takeaways, 5 points in this window was acceptable. We need more center mid depth, and Berhalter has to stop overcoaching. And I'm right there with you, Andrew. I think Berhalter, again, needs to be called into question here, because some of the tactical decisions he made were confusing, especially that Honduras lineup. And we could have brought in more center mid depth. I'm going to talk about that in the next segment. And the last tweet, Lou Cutri at Lou Cutri on Twitter. I guess that's how you say it, Cutri. My con is that we are winning and tiring in spite of Berhalter, not because of him. Berhalter's system appears to defensive-minded when we have a bunch of offensive talent. Is all wrong. I disagree that Berhalter's system is defensive-minded. I think the Berhalter wants to be attacking. I think that the lack of goals that we've conceded throughout the summer and everything are kind of a product of the possession attacking soccer that Berhalter wants to play. But I agree that right now it doesn't look like we are winning because of Berhalter's system. So thank you, everyone, for your tweets. I very much appreciate you all responding to that. Again, follow us on Twitter at SoccerForUsPod. And hopefully we'll have more comments and thoughts like this in the future. All right. Okay. Let's talk about Greg Berhalter. But I want to talk specifically about one thing that I think Greg Berhalter screwed up the most in this window, and it has more to do with his management of the team as a whole. How bad was his roster management this window? Now, the roster came out, 26 players. I thought that was a little thin, but I thought, okay, you know what? I get it. 26 players. I think the 26 that he brought in, for the most part, were the top 26 he could bring in. Fine. Thought you could have brought in more. Whatever. I was concerned that he only brought 5 midfielders, because when you're playing a midfield trio and you only have 5, to me, that's a little concerning. Yes, he used Brendan Aronson as a midfielder in El Salvador. That didn't really work. And then we didn't really see that again. So only 5 midfielders, probably need to be more going forward. But then before camp even starts, Tim Weah gets injured and Greg doesn't replace him. So now we're down a winger, right? We brought in 4. Now we only have 3. Maybe 5 if you count Aronson and Weas, right? Okay, now we're down to 4. Okay, why didn't you call someone in to replace Weah? At that point, you could have said, oh, you're hurt, which, by the way, should have known he was hurt before you released the roster or before people started getting on planes. You could have called someone in Europe at this point to come over. You could have called a Julian Green. You could have called even Tyler Boyd. I don't love him, but those are options that you could have brought in. But he didn't. Greg didn't. He decided to not call anyone. He said, nope, 25 is fine. While we knew that Pooley was probably heading into this camp, I was 95% positive Pooley would not travel to El Salvador. He had just gotten off of COVID. The first time he had trained with the team in 10 days was when he arrived in Nashville. So now you're down 2 wingers for that El Salvador game. Then Zach Steffen gets back spasms and then tests positive for COVID, so he's out of camp. We're losing a lot of players. After the first game, Gio Reyna comes up injured. You could have called in another player, Greg. You called in Sean Johnson to replace Zach Steffen. So don't tell me that you couldn't have brought someone in. And even if it wasn't someone European, you could have brought in a domestic player. There are players in this hemisphere you could have brought up to replace Gio Reyna. You could replace Zach Steffen, but not Gio Reyna. I find that incredibly farcical from Greg Berhalter. That's shameful that he botched his roster management that poorly. So we lose McKinney for the Canada game because he broke COVID protocol. So now we're down from the original 26. We're down 3 players because McKinney breaks protocol, Weah's hurt, and Gio's hurt. 3 players. So that would have been 23. Steffen gets COVID or tests positive for COVID. Okay, it's 22, but he brings in Sean Johnson. We're at 23, which is the most that we have to, the bare minimum we need for a roster. We're at the bare minimum. We're carrying exactly 23 players. Then in the game against Canada, Des sprains his ankle. And Berhalter doesn't call up anyone to replace a right-sided fullback. We only have one. We only had one. It was DeAndre Yedlin. You're back up to your contingency plan to Sergiño Des or DeAndre Yedlin getting hurt. Can't be Tyler Adams at right wing back. That's not okay, Greg. We have too many right backs in this pool that you could have called up. So we head into Honduras. Weston has been dismissed from camp. Now we're at 22 players. And he brings up Jackson Ewell. Sure, okay, I get that you replaced McKinney with Ewell. Sure. We'll pretend like that's a like-for-like replacement. And it's not, but we'll pretend. But Jackson Ewell was a guy who looked lost against Honduras the first time we played them this summer and lost his starting spot in Gold Cup. He wasn't good enough for the competition in Gold Cup, Greg, and you made that decision because you're the person who didn't play him. And you call him up in the emergency? It's not like we're doing well. We have only tied 2 games. We've looked disjointed. And now several key players are injured or unavailable, and you call up Jackson Ewell and make no other changes to help the roster to give us more options. You absolutely botched your roster management this window, Greg Berhalter. I'm going to give a slight break to him for the fact that probably once the window started, once we started getting into training camp, it was very unlikely that a European-based player could have been called in. I get the travel restrictions and the COVID protocol. I get that. But remember, he still intentionally left many of those guys in Europe. Julian Green, Luca De La Torre left them at home. Christian Cappy left them in Europe. On top of guys that he said, no, you stay and work out transfer issues that he could have called up. However, there are still domestic players, or at least players in this hemisphere, who he could have called in to replace the guys who dropped. Kyle Duncan, Nick Lima, Aaron Herrera. All 3 of those could have been right back replacements without even having to talk to Julian Araujo. There are guys like Georgi Mihailovic. I don't love him. Corey Baird. I don't love him. Chris Mueller, Jesus Ferreira, Johnny Cardoso, Sebastian Salcedo, even maybe Paxton Pomacall, who have all been in a Berhalter camp, who he didn't bother calling to just be a guy who could be there in training and be there in case of an actual emergency. Those are all wingers or midfielders who could have served a purpose, right? I'm not saying these are fantastic players or guys who I want to start World Cup qualifiers. But they are players who can fill out the camp and possibly play in an emergency, and still left us with a better right back option than Tyler Adams or Kellen Acosta, who are much better in the midfield. It would have left us with more than 3 healthy wingers at the end. Berhalter completely mismanaged the roster, and that's a lot on him. It may not be all on him, because I don't know what Brian McBride and Arnie Stewart did to help guide him into making these decisions. But at the end of the day, Berhalter just decided to not adapt to the situations in front of him. He didn't adapt to any of the, problems that he faced. Any hurdle he met, he paused and didn't go over it. I don't know what he did. He just let it be there. He made this so much harder on himself. There was no contingency plan, which is a terrible idea in COVID times. You have to have contingency plans in these COVID protocol times. This specifically needs to be better in October. And it starts by calling more than 26 players. I don't know what that magic number is, but it's higher than 26. I don't know what the cap, like the highest amount you would want to bring in. It might be 30 is probably the pushing it. But you can still have then a list of players on a contingency roster, right? Just in case. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully we don't have the injuries and COVID problems that we had this window. But you still could have fixed those problems that we had by calling in more than 26 players and replacing Weah immediately once you knew he was hurt, because he didn't play Saturday. You announced the roster on a Thursday. There was time in there that you probably would have said, oh, he's hurt. Let's call up someone else. You could have done it, Greg. Our greatest advantage we have against other CONCACAF teams right now is our depth. Use it, Greg. Use it. But at the end of this not great qualifying window, we still have 5 points. We're in a qualifying position. We're third. We're only 2 points from Mexico. We have 2 home matches next window. I'm putting it out there right now that 7 is the minimum that we should win in that next window, because the Panama match away is winnable. I agree they played really well. It's winnable. And also, I'm going to say that, hopefully next window, Greg is going to be able to call in guys like Happy, Shaq Moore, Yunus Musa, maybe even a guy like, hopefully he looks at Julian Green or Luca De La Torre. There are guys that hopefully he can bring in from Europe who won't be dealing with transfer situations. Chris Richards will be one of those. I don't mention him that much because I don't think that he is going to have a place on the roster the way that other guys would have been able to help us. But I think Chris Richards is brought in next window as well. So there's a lot of things to be confident about heading into the next window, right? I think we're going to be able to get better players. I think hopefully we've learned some things from this window. But I'm just not confident in Greg and his ability to manage this team right now. I'm confident in the quality of our players individually, and I'm confident in the quality of the players as a team. But Greg Berhalter is holding this team back right now, and I don't think that's a controversial take. I'm not saying Berhalter out, but I'm saying that Greg needs to get out of the way and find a way for the players to be at their best, because right now they're not playing at their best, and that's on Berhalter. And he's got to fix that. And if he doesn't, then we need to find someone who can get these players to play at the level that they're capable of, because we see it week in and week out in Europe, and we're not seeing it here for the U.S. men's national team. All right, let's take a quick break, and I'm going to come back and talk about the U.S. women's national team September friendlies. Hey, y'all, it's Bart. I got my Play Like a Girl USA scarf from American Football Provisions, and I got to tell you, it is awesome. Much better looking in person than I thought it even would be. It is great. American Football Provisions is a soccer apparel company created for supporters by supporters of the beautiful game. Their mission is to support all levels of professional soccer in the U.S. and promote a culture of respect and inclusion. You can celebrate all past, present, and future female American footballers with this Play Like a Girl scarf from American Football Provisions. Pick yours up today at AmericanFootballProvisions.com or browse their extensive collection of fan-made football accessories. That's AmericanFootballProvisions.com. The U.S. women's national team will welcome Paraguay to the United States for the first ever meetings between these two senior teams. They will play on Thursday, September 16th at 7:30 p.m. in Cleveland, and then stay in the state of Ohio for a match on Tuesday, September 21st at 7:30 p.m. in Cincinnati. This is the first time we will see the U.S. women's national team since they grabbed bronze in Tokyo. We all remember it as a very disappointing tournament, but it did end with a 4-3 victory over Australia and a medal. So not like we came home empty-handed. And we had a lot of questions about this team and coach Vlatko Andonovski after the tournament. Now, I think it's foolish for us to expect him to address all this questions in this window because this team that we're playing is not very good. But I do applaud Vlatko for bringing in some younger faces into the group to help hopefully train, and I want to see them play. That's the biggest thing. They need to play. So the roster for this camp for the United States, you have goalkeepers Jane Campbell from Houston and Adi Franch from now Kansas City. Defenders, Abby Dahlkemper from Houston, Tierney Davison from Chicago, Crystal Dunn from Portland, Casey Kruger from Chicago, Kelly O'Hara from Washington Spirit, Becky Sauerbrunn from Portland Thorns, Emily Sonnet from Washington Spirit. Now, we'll see if those Washington Spirit players can make it to this through this. They've had some COVID issues. Hopefully, they're in camp. They should be fine, but I'm still skeptical of that. But the defensive group is really nothing spectacular. It's the same that we saw for Tokyo. Midfielders, there are 5 brought in. Lindsay Horan from Portland, Rose Lavelle from OL Reign, Katarina Macario from Olympique Lyon, Christy Mewis from Houston Dash, and Andy Sullivan from Washington Spirit. Very glad that Andy Sullivan is here to replace Julie Ertz, and I hope she plays. Play her, Vlatko. Play her. Everyone else, I think, is pretty straightforward, explanatory. The only one not here outside of that would be Sam Mewis. So, but other than that, I think that's a trend is you just have some players right now who are either injured or just don't want to, force it right now. Forwards, 6 of them. Tobin Heath, now at Arsenal. Carly Lloyd from Gotham FC. Alex Morgan from Orlando Pride. Mal Pugh from Chicago Red Stars. Sophia Smith from Portland. And Lynn Williams from North Carolina. Now, I'm very excited that he has brought in Mal and Sophia. I wish he would have brought in Mitch Purse as a defender, but that's probably getting too greedy for what Vlatko seems to be doing is slowly transitioning from older players to younger. But Mal and Sophia present what could be the future of the U.S. women's national team attacking line. Right now, we have attacking players who are very technical. They're fast. Like Kristen Press is fast. Alex Morgan's fast. But the core of them are just very technically good players who are skilled on the ball and able to combine with each other going forward. We saw that the problem with that, though, is when we don't have speed to break past a defensive line, we don't score goals. So I'm hoping that Mal and Sophia can start to win a way into this core group. Now, there are only 20 players. It seems a bit shocking, but Paraguay only brought 18, so I think it's more about just a small group of players for only 2 games in a window that's not really that important. So I'm glad to see Macario, Smith, and Pugh, who I think are the future very young players. I think they're the players who we need to be looking at to push us into 23 and even maybe 27. Not a lot of deviation from the Olympic roster, but you do see that Ertz, Press, Mewis, Rapinoe, and Nair are staying home for various reasons, and that's fine. It's fine. Again, Paraguay's not very good, right? They're number 50 in the world rankings, coached by Epifania Benitez. They have 11 players in the Primera División Femenina in Paraguay, which has been running continuously since 1999. But overall, this team is just not great. Sorry, they're not. And that's okay to say that because this is going to be a couple of friendlies that are more about, getting the players back together and kind of celebrating the fact that, Tokyo is over and we didn't completely suck. So here's the Paraguay roster real quick. Goalkeepers, Alicia Bobadilla from San Lorenzo Almagro in Argentina, and Cristina Recalde from CD Juan Grande in Spain. Defenders, Sofia Almiron from Sol de America in Paraguay, Lorena Alonso from Sol de America, Daisy Barrero from CD Juan Grande in Spain, Limpia Fretes from Cerro Porteño, Fiorella Martinez from Libertad Limpeño, Maria Martinez from Olympia, Daisy Ojeda from Olympia, Mirta Pico from Sol de America, and Tania Riso from Deportivo Capiata. I'm going to probably butcher that again. I'm sorry. Midfielders, Cynthia Ayala from Minas Brasilia Futebol in Brazil, Fanny Guato from Santa Fe de Bogota in Colombia, Fanny Godoy from CD Juan Grande in Spain, Celso Sandoval from Esporte Club Bahia in Brazil, and Janine Servin from Cerro Porteño. So a couple of midfielders play in the Brazilian league. And up top, they only have two strikers, Ramona Martinez and Liz Pena. Ramona from Olympia and Pena from Libertad Limpeño. So again, 11 of these, 18 from Paraguay. They are a team in CONMEBOL who I just don't rate them very highly. I'd hate to be negative, but this is going to be we're not going to learn a lot about the U.S. team. And because of that, I'd love to see players who are not considered starters playing in this window. I need to see Casey Kruger play. I need to see Sophia Smith play. I'd love to see Mal Pugh get a lot of minutes too. But most importantly, from Vlatko, I want to see Andy Sullivan play 90% of the minutes at the defensive mid spot. There are 180. I want her to be at like 160 plus because we need to find a solution behind Julie Ertz. We need to have a player who can play that defensive midfield position behind Julie Ertz. And it can't be Lindsay Horan. I'm not taking anything away from Lindsay. It just can't be her because she's also useful other places. And on top of that, we also need to just break in Sophia Smith, and we need to find a left back who's not Crystal Dunn. This is now the time when Vlatko can start feeling these out. You know, if it's a whole 45 minutes for Casey Kruger at left back, great. If it's a whole 45 or a couple of 30-minute appearances for Smith up top or Pugh up top, great. They just need to be getting actual minutes, meaningful minutes in these two matches. Because I don't need to see more of Tobin Heath on the front line. I know what she's going to give me. I don't need to see, and I love her, I don't need to see more of Rose Lavelle in midfield. I know what she's going to do. We need to see how other players can perform within the system and in this group. And this is a perfect opportunity against a really bad team in a couple of matches to see how they can play in this group. Now, you're not going to be able to make grand, pronouncements about their play, but it's just a good way to get them involved, get them to understand and learn how to play with each other. So that's what I want from Vlatko. And I've been saying it for a while. Let's actually play some younger talent and integrate them into your system and into this group. So again, you've got games against Paraguay on Thursday, September 16th at 7:30, and then Tuesday, September 21st at 7:30. I'm done talking. Thanks for listening to me ramble for about an hour now. I hope you have paid attention. Make sure you follow the show at Soccer For Us Pod. Follow us on Twitter there. Subscribe to the Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening right now. Thanks again for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.